Did this dude just crawl out of a war bunker? A cop snickered, shoving a chair toward the defendant like worthless junk, grinning wide. He cracked jokes in front of the bench, called the man a lawyerless clown, ordered cuffs when he stayed mute, never expecting that black stranger's badge, Director, FBI. The courthouse was jammed, yet after those 4 quiet words, the whole machine seemed to seize. Justice had been punchline material. Now it stared back. What would you do? Which state do you even claim then? Monday's district session opened in damp air, smelling of dust, ink, old coffee, stalled righteousness. Half the benches held clerks, a few older interns, and several uniforms clearly from the local department. Everything felt routine, bland, like every minor calendar case. Then, the left door swung open. 2 security officers strode in. First, faces hard, carrying themselves like they were escorting a bomb, not a defendant. Between them walked a black man, no chains, yet shadowed so tightly he looked one twitch away from being tackled. His shirt was wrinkled, collar stained. The dried blood mark along his collar looked aged, like it had crusty through a long, cold night. Court lighting was dim, but enough to catch everything. His gaze stayed strangely calm. No visible anger, no pleading, just a flat, heavy stillness. He didn't glance around, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge whispered pity. The officers guided him to the defense table, nodded, stepped back. The whole room seemed to miss a heartbeat. Someone coughed. A chair squeaked, nervous. He sat down, back upright, eyes fixed on the empty bench's shadow. No one knew his name. No attorney waited. No family lingered in hallways. He seemed wrapped in a weird emptiness, like his identity had been vacuumed out. The clerk scanned the file, eyebrows knitting, glancing toward the tech booth. No address listed. No emergency contact, no job history, no priors, she muttered under her breath. Unheard, but the suspicion in her eyes was obvious. The judge appeared a few minutes later, a pale, middle-aged white man with a reddish nose, walking stiffly like he'd grown into his office chair. He glanced at the first sheet, then at the defendant. He repeated the motion, flipping through thin paperwork, rolling his pen, tapping the microphone gently. This session is now in order. Silence. 5 seconds of dead air. Then a high, clear kid's voice sliced through from the gallery. Naive, unfiltered. Is he a bad guy, Mom? Head swiveled. A boy, maybe 7, curly-haired, honest eyes, tugged his mother's hand, pointing straight at the black defendant. His mom flushed, dragged him closer, bowed her head, but the damage was done. A young officer behind them snorted. Another laughed openly, no restraint. If you look at that face and don't see a problem, I gotta get my eyes checked. Ladder trickled, then rolled. Some nodded, some slapped their legs. Others traded smirks like they'd found a juicy story to spice up their otherwise boring Monday shift. The defendant didn't move. No embarrassment, no flinch at the child's question, no reaction to the snickers. His stare stayed icy, like water about to freeze. That lack of response twisted the atmosphere. An innocent usually protests. A guilty one shrinks. He did neither, like someone long acquainted with public mockery and disbelief. The judge cleared his throat, trying to reclaim formality. "Defendant's name?" he asked. "Nothing." The clerk leaned toward the mic, voice small. "No name listed on record." Again the judge frowned, leaning closer. "You appear without counsel?" The man gave a single deliberate nod. "Self-representation." Another nod, calm, unhurried, unbothered. Any statement before charges are read? For the first time, the man locked eyes with him. 3 seconds of contact, enough to make the judge lean back. Something felt off. He sensed it, same as everyone else, but chose the convenient route, ignoring the crack in the wall to keep the ceiling steady. The hush that settled wasn't fear, it was confusion. That confusion was more frightening than rage, like staring at a storm and seeing no clouds. It was the feeling when someone doesn't get mad at insults, isn't shocked at humiliation, doesn't react to being lumped with trash, because that's familiar territory. Maybe this scene was just another rerun for him. Or maybe this time he was here for a reason nobody in that room could read. Not that anyone cared. They were busy enjoying the group permission slip to mock a nameless man, a voiceless man, a man without visible defenders. An office clerk at the back discreetly raised his phone, filming the courtroom. In frame, the black man sat straight, bloodstain catching the dull light. Sharply, another snapped a photo, sending it to an internal chat. This morning, self-defense circus live. Got tickets? Followed by a crying laugh emoji, digital smirk attached. Nobody yet realized they weren't the audience. They were extras. This wasn't about judging one man, but about undressing an entire institution mid-performance. Still, the laughter bounced around the courtroom, the sound of licensed power, unconscious domination, blades swinging without even bothering to see who bled underneath. The man didn't speak, didn't need to. He sat like a fixed shadow, like a printed exam, letting everyone mark the wrong answers themselves. This hearing began in mockery and would end in a silence no one could quite name. But for now, one thing was sure. The door had opened. Those laughing loudest had only a few minutes of free laughter left before reality stepped forward and turned the lights up. The last chuckle hadn't even died when a man's voice cut through, thick with disdain. "I've met plenty like you," he scoffed, shaking his head, "always screaming justice and rights. Then you get hauled in and suddenly you're holy." No one looked surprised, no objection. His words slid through like dull knives. They shaved off whatever pride still clung to the defendant's face. Soft laughter followed, the kind people give when they co-sign cruelty by doing nothing. A uniformed cop shot the defendant a look, lip-curling. "This guy thinks he's the action hero, man. Probably saw himself as Denzel this morning." Laughter exploded again, the room more factory floor than court. Prejudice mass-produced. Arrogance cranked to max. Dignity's grenade pin already yanked without thought. The black man stayed seated. No blink, no twitch, no tremor in his hands. His stillness made the air go thinner, tighter. For a moment, that tension was ripped open by another officer pulling out his phone. "Check this out," he said. "This part's comedy gold." He tapped play, speakers hissing. The shaky body cam footage showed a night arrest. Flashing reds and blues, the defendant thrown down, hands up, following orders while voices shouted, "Resisting! He's resisting!" A scream, a kick, then blackout. The clip froze. "That's it?" someone asked. The cop grinned. "Tech says the rest got corrupted. Hell of a coincidence, huh?" A young clerk muttered, "Yeah, corrupted is the new word for edited," half under his breath. He stepped out, came back with another video already cued. This one was recorded from the gallery that very morning. Clear enough, the defendant entering, light catching that dried blood on his collar, like some twisted ribbon. Add this stupid laugh filter. Throw in a TikTok track over his silent entrance. Boom! Instant viral. The clerk chuckled, fingers flying while he edited. What should we call it? Oh, I got it. This morning's Black Feature Show. Perfect, someone said. And the room erupted again. Louder. Totally unrestrained. Younger spectators stood for better angles. A secretary laughed so hard she covered her mouth, mascara streaking. The security captain leaned toward a staffer, voice low. Bet you this guy played a corpse on some cop drama. She wheezed laughter, dabbing her eyes. Yeah, a corpse with great eye contact, she added. In one corner, an older officer sat with arms folded, lips tight. A colleague nudged him. What? Feeling bad for the guy now? He shrugged, squinted at the defendant. Just wondering how long he can stand it. The defendant didn't turn or respond. No strain visible, no bowed head. His silence wasn't surrender. It was thick glass, reflecting every insult, every cackle, every peeling layer of decency from the faces circling him like vultures, a mirror none of them could escape, showing them laughing at someone they assumed was beneath them, while displaying their own ugliness in brutal clarity. But nobody in the room was sharp enough or honest enough to recognize it. Minutes later, the judge waved toward the tech booth. Play the official body cam now. Lights dimmed. The footage rolled again. Dark alley. Defendant emerging. Hands raised. Compliant. Yells of, resisting, obstructing, neatly matched a blow to his back. Then blackout. The frame froze. In the corner, small text appeared. Error 418. Frame unreadable. The room laughed on cue, like someone had rehearsed the reaction beforehand. Guess criminals hack body cams now, someone whispered. The cop by the screen smirked. Didn't need to hack a thing. The system did him that favor itself. He roared laughing. The noise thickened, filling the room like smoke with no exit. It wasn't sound anymore. It was a blunt weapon, swung hard. Each laugh was a bullet shot from their gut, no aim required, always landing in the chest of the one man who never flinched. Yet the man sitting upright, gaze steady, remained untouched. So they hurled ridicule instead, hoping to chip through his composure, hoping to finally make him crack. This wasn't a hearing, it was theater. A pantomime of fake authority starring people terrified of one thing, the quiet of someone who refuses to beg. A door guard leaned toward his buddy. His face isn't reacting. Still, something feels wrong, the others snickered. Wrong because you're soft. Don't let a stare scare you. Just laugh. And they did, long and loud, like laughter came with immunity from consequence, like karma never kept receipts or interest rates. On the evidence table, a file slid into a plastic sleeve, stamped processed. Nobody asked who processed it, who signed, who might have trimmed inconvenient pieces. A tech team got orders to delete the original from temporary storage, pending further review. But what's left to review when everything's already unfolded in plain sight? Maybe nobody wanted to know. Maybe everyone already knew and just refused to be first, to admit their laughs broke at the worst possible moment. In that storm's center, the man remained unchanged. Back straight, blood on his collar, gaze quiet as a verdict already written, waiting to be spoken aloud. Those laughing never realized they'd started a trial by drawing a blade across their own honor. It had no obvious edge, yet still promised blood. The room grew quieter, not because jokes ran dry, but because nobody wanted to be the last one caught laughing once the things shifted. He'd spoken no words, but everything they'd said had turned into evidence. Nobody needed to accuse them. They'd indicted themselves with open mouths and cheap jokes. Every second that morning, every giggle recorded, every sneer, every shared clip, stopped being entertainment. It hardened into something relentless, silent, and irreversible. Laughter's sour aftertaste still clung to the air like toxic fumes. But the man at the center didn't need to move to quiet the noise. One slow sweep of his eyes, like a clock hand dragging heavy minutes, made people look down, like shoplifters caught with empty pockets and guilty hands. Officers who'd been chuckling seconds earlier straightened up, unconsciously corrected by orders that were never voiced. There's a silence that commands without raising its volume. It doesn't restrain people. It makes them restrain themselves, afraid their superficiality might show. The judge straightened, elbows on the bench, trying to recapture the hearing's rhythm. He stared at the barely filled file, then at the defendant, speaking quicker than before, voice dry. "Do you request an attorney appointed by this court?" The man didn't move, except for one firm shake of his head. A refusal. No request. No need. The judge repeated, for the record. "You confirm you'll represent yourself here?" The man's voice surfaced for the first time. Low, steady, no theatrics, just strong enough to make the microphone hum oddly. "I'll speak for myself." 4 words, the last one dropping like a stone lid over a coffin. Conversation died. No one dared fill the silence. At the rear corner, a young court reporter fumbled her pen. It rolled across the floor and stopped right beside the defendant's polished, worn shoes. She bent to retrieve it. When she looked up, her eyes locked with his. No threat, no anger, just a deep, cold, unsettling light, like something rising from ocean darkness, quiet but immense. Her hand trembled before she forced a thin, professional smile and turned away, the image stamped inside. The judge tapped the mic again, clinging to the script drilled into him over 30 years. "Anything else before the indictment is read?" he asked evenly. The man turned his head, neither fast nor slow. His gaze wasn't defensive anymore. It landed like a heavy bullet placed gently on the table. No words, no urgency, no dodge, just absence, not from someone lacking lines, but someone who no longer needed language to make his point. Existence itself became a refusal, a quiet no striking straight through the chests of those expecting some outburst to relieve their mounting tension. On the back bench, a law intern, pale, blonde, maybe mid-20s, clutched his notebook. At first, he'd scribbled fast, chasing every detail like extra credit. But after that mute answer, his pen slowed, then stopped. Not from lack of content, but because what happened couldn't fit standard legal terminology. After a long pause, he scrawled along the page's bottom margin, a crooked line with no punctuation, written from doubt instead of certainty. "This is not an ordinary man," the sentence echoed in his head, shifting from observation to quiet verdict, neither defending nor condemning, just refusing to forget. Sometimes someone sits in the defendant's chair and makes the entire courtroom feel somehow lower than the worn wood beneath his elbows. Nobody in that room knew how to move forward. The remaining phases, reading charges, opening arguments, cross-examination, felt hollow since the central figure wouldn't play his part. He didn't reject the role, but he refused the script. That alone made this structured arena of power distribution feel like a stage with no director. There's a kind of power that doesn't come from rank or title, but from making everyone question their own roles in the story. By sitting still, asking no favors, speaking barely at all, he made everyone else in the room feel unnecessary, like props in somebody else's test. Glances started darting between people, not suspicious, but uncertain. When mockery, pressure, humiliation all slam into silence, nobody knows which page to read next. An officer who'd strutted earlier now fidgeted, checking his watch. A female clerk pretended to dig through her bag rather than possibly meet his unreadable gaze. The judge paused his pen, resting his chin on one hand, as if staring at a chessboard he couldn't remember setting up. He wasn't sure anymore whether the man across from him was playing black, white, or had flipped the board entirely without touching any piece. When the system faces resistance, it knows how to crush. When it faces rage, it knows how to suppress. It has scripts for both. But confronted with someone needing no defense, offering no speeches, reacting in no standard way, it stalls. That confusion now crackled through all four walls. No shouting, no punches, no contested physical evidence, just a man sitting upright, like a sentence not yet underlined, forcing everyone to reread themselves carefully. The fallen pen was back on her table, but the faint scuff on the floor where it hit remained. Tiny proof that impacts linger. With the man's last fleeting glance as the judge exhaled, ready to shift sections, everyone understood one thing clearly. His silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. From this moment forward, everyone else would be talking about themselves, whether they realized it or not. The hearing continued, but the trial subject had quietly flipped. Silence became the heaviest gavel in a room already sagging under the weight of wasted, careless, damaging words thrown around like playground taunts. He stayed seated, spine straight, eyes forward, posture steady down to the smallest vertebra. The discomfort around him simmered, thick and inescapable. That very silence carved out a vacuum. Others rushed to fill with smug certainty. A cop stood, holding a file as thin as a grocery receipt. "I'll reread the defendant's record," he announced, fake helpfulness dripping, "just to clarify things." No one objected. A few nodded eagerly, grateful for distraction. He eyed the defendant sideways and began. "No job, no formal education listed, no stable address. Real model citizen here," he drawled, stretching each sarcastic word. Laughter flared again, staggered but strong enough to make the air feel dirty. Nobody bothered to wipe their faces clean of it. A cluster of law students, still young but already steeped in fresh diploma arrogance, broke into loud laughter as if grades guaranteed moral superiority. One, hair-dyed steel gray, slapped his thigh and yelled, "Who invited this clown? Is this court or improv class?" Heads bobbed, unthinking. Laughter rolled like ball bearings across marble. Even the reporter winced. Not because it was funny, but because she knew they'd crossed decency's bare minimum line. A middle-aged man in the back, modest clothes, neatly pressed shirt, old frames on his nose, turned toward the students, voice held but burning. "You think this is a joke? What you're laughing at is someone's right to exist," he said. The air froze, just for a heartbeat. A cop moved fast. No questions, no explanation. "Sir, you're disturbing proceedings. Please step out." The man slipped off his glasses, looked at them, and slowly stood. He didn't resist, but the look he left behind was a quiet warning in a place where reason drowned beneath cheap laughter. Character dies first here. Soon after, an odd sound rose from a corner. Low buzz, Then music. Someone played a TikTok clip. Volume low, message loud enough anyway. On screen, the defendant's image had been edited, zoomed, looped. His entry replayed with a mocking parody track layering over his silent, unreacting face. The beat was light, lyrics rewritten to taunt, walking in like a runway pose, silent like a dummy who froze. Cold face, failed interview vibe. Latter erupted again, now with whistles and soft clapping, like the courtroom had turned into a live comedy taping, not a place to weigh lives. The man didn't move. No phone, no head turn, no shift in posture. Just for a heartbeat, something sharp flickered through his eyes like steel. The reporter closest to him caught it. It didn't explode, it sliced, like metal grazing skin, leaving chills in its wake, more suggestion than threat. Anyone perceptive could have seen it wasn't one man being mocked. It was the shape of a whole system laughing into its own cracked mirror. No one, not even the judge, had the courage to stop the music. Nobody asked who pressed play. That silence became permission for contempt. This trial didn't need a verdict. Judgment already fell when they chose videos over evidence, trending sounds over truth, laughter over understanding. That was the day's crime. The echo of scattered laughter still rippled like an oil sheen when the courtroom door nudged open again. Quietly. No fanfare, no announcement. A woman stepped in. Nothing striking. Plain gray blouse, modest skirt, beige flats rubbed at the edges. Not the dramatic type from political thrillers, but the way she walked, silent, steady, unhurried, felt like a countdown ticking. A few heads rose, sensing something off, not knowing what exactly. She didn't move toward the bench or the police row. She walked straight to the defendant's table like she'd navigated this route 100 times. In her hand sat a white envelope, no seal, no stamp, no markings. A nearby guard stepped in front of her, palm out to block. She paused, reached into her inner pocket, produced a small dark card, lifting it to his eye level. Federal Liaison, it read in italic deep blue background. No one checked authenticity. No one dared. She moved on, placed the envelope in front of the defendant, then turned and headed back toward the door. By the time people registered her leaving, she was gone. The man regarded the envelope briefly. No rush, no visible surprise, only the recognition of expectation fulfilled. He'd been waiting. Finally, he picked it up, opened it, unfolded a small worn paper inside, edges slightly frayed like it had traveled a long path. One handwritten line in black ink, "Be ready." No signature, no punctuation. He stared at it like someone watching the first spark of a new century. His jaw tightened subtly. His eyes shifted, not in color but depth, moving from patient to alert, from surviving to executing. An officer shrugged, unimpressed. "Let him fantasize," he muttered. "Guys like this love theatrics, secret agent scraps of paper and everything." Another cop chuckled, though one question gnawed silently. "Who authorized her entrance?" Like the earlier sigh from the escorted-out man, that question floated unanswered, destined to find either silence or fear. The defendant folded the note, slipped it back into the envelope, laid it neatly on the table like an exhibit no one else could touch. He returned to stillness as if the woman had never existed. But for those who truly saw, the surface water had just been disturbed. The ripples hadn't reached shore yet, but the stone already lay at the bottom. The judge's face shifted, sensing a current sliding beneath the proceedings. He leaned into the mic, enunciating carefully. "State your previous occupation for the record." The pause that followed wasn't hesitation. It was precise measuring of consequences. The man lifted his head, stared ahead. "Former federal investigative work," he answered. No elaboration, no title. But the words cracked the courtroom's plastered confidence. A young cop let out a brittle laugh. "If you're federal, then I'm the Archbishop of New York," he scoffed, his chuckle sounding like burned paper. Some joined, cautiously. Most held back. Those 4 words echoed in the minds of anyone halfway perceptive. Something about the air had clearly changed temperature. In the tech booth, a staffer got ordered to pull his file. Fingers flew. The monitor flashed a pale red line that chilled her instantly. Classified asset. Access refused. She tried again with higher credentials. A warning tone chimed. Another message. Classified data. Security code G44. A gray-haired supervisor leaned in. "Why is G44 on a civilian case?" he murmured. No one answered. No one was allowed to. G44 wasn't meant for local troublemakers. It was reserved for files that shouldn't exist, or existed only because the country needed to forget something too dangerous to remember. The man stayed motionless. No smugness. No confirmation. His silence now wasn't a shield. It was a deliberate crack splitting across the courtroom mural, set to spread quietly. In what had seemed a routine case, truth wasn't hiding in pleas. It lived in one answer nobody believed, and one data flag nobody dared explain. Back in the systems room, the access codes on screen shifted from green to amber to bright red. A short beep snapped, like a lock slammed shut. The tech about to run another search watched the interface go black, then refresh with one frozen line. Account locked, due to unauthorized red priority sector attempt. She barely processed it when the last window vanished and the main screen flashed. Access revoked and session dropped. Her hand trembled on the mouse. Another staffer approached to tease, stopped cold at the display. He scanned an internal note only visible to top clearance users. "Do not touch. Red priority, no copies." Nobody asked why. Everyone understood anything marked red priority wasn't a joke. The text started to stand, then paused as her internal inbox pinged sharply. A GovDomain email. No subject, no signature, no attachments. Just 7 words. Maintain current state. Do not ask anything. Verification string. Authentic, unforgeable. No one in that room touched another key. The monitor went dark after 20 seconds, leaving behind not emptiness, but a thick, wordless suspicion. Meanwhile, the far door in court opened again. No introduction, no roll call. The state police chief entered, not in uniform but a fitted charcoal suit. 2 men in black suits followed, close-cropped hair, sunglasses indoors like they'd been trained to see in different kinds of darkness. None said a thing. Their presence alone announced that this had moved beyond local administration. The judge shot to his feet, gave a quick, urgent nod instead of a greeting. The chief walked to the room's center. The students who'd laughed hardest sat frozen, lips pressed shut like they'd forgotten how sound worked. An officer stepped forward to ask a question. Stopped when he met the eyes of the man on the right. One look pinned him in place. Their footsteps weren't loud, yet each one felt heavy, compressing language itself. When they reached the defense table, the defendant didn't look back or move. They stopped behind him. No hand on his shoulder, no whisper. One agent pulled a slim object from his jacket, unclear if badge, warrant, or something darker. He held it for 3 seconds, long enough that no one needed confirmation. The cop who'd laughed loudest at the TikTok clip stumbled back, whispering, "What is this?" No answer. That was worst of all. A room once rattling with laughter now suffocated under silence so dense even someone swallowing sounded like gunfire. One judge, a state chief, two nameless agents, all present, none declaring anything. Sometimes just showing up is the ruling, and silence is the siren. At the table, the man remained a locked question mark, making every answer around him feel pointless. Somewhere else, a data center admin reached for the phone. Before he spoke, a deep voice cut in. "I know what you're about to ask. Don't. Touch G44 again, and your access dies in 60 seconds. The line dropped. No goodbye. Somewhere between bureaucracy and shadow authority, a hair-thin border snapped. No one could distinguish law, order, secrecy anymore. The two black-suited men's steps still echoed faintly in court, but outside, the internet had already rewritten the trial into bite-size, absurd entertainment. A TikTok titled "Silent Thug, Where's He Really From?" passed 1 million views in half a day. His image slowed, zoomed, filtered with a bright red clown overlay. Laughter from the courtroom became a looping sound effect under sarcastic rap bars. Comments poured in. The pinned one read, "Guilty on sight." Nearly 40,000 likes. "Anyone who stays that quiet is hiding something," another wrote. Memes placed him beside comic book villains, captioned "Enemy of Society, knows the law won't save him." None of them had sat in that room. None had felt the air shift when even the police chief backed down. This was just content. But in a training hall at Quantico, recruits watched the same footage. No filters, no soundtracks, no emojis, just the badge from his case, lifted in silence. No one paused the recording. No phones appeared. When the clip ended, the classroom stayed frozen, every cadet stiff as carved stone. A trainee in the third row finally spoke, voice shaky, still processing. Why didn't he defend himself from the start? His question sounded like confession. The instructor stepped toward the front, hands still locked behind his back, gaze sweeping not one cadet, but the entire room, steady and measuring. He didn't shout, didn't sermonize. His words dropped softly, like a pebble breaking a still pond. Because your laughter was exactly what he needed. No one asked anything else. Not from fear, but comprehension. Laughter is the cheapest response when we don't understand, don't care, or can't accept someone's depth. That same laughter now stood as evidence, needing no cross, no witnesses, no deadline. Ford never needed defenders. He only waited for masks to fall. Behind him, the final slide glowed. White text on black. Justice isn't what you claim. It's what you expose about yourself. No embellishment, nothing extra. No one needed translations. No one bothered taking notes. Each word burned in, not as coursework, but as an epitaph over any dishonored badge. Class was dismissed, yet no one rose immediately. A cadet in back, eyes wet, clenched her pen so hard it snapped in her hand. She whispered to the person beside her, voice cracking, "I once shared that parody video in our college group." No one scolded, no one reacted, because nothing spoken could erase the sting of seeing your own smirk in that footage. Not your face, but your posture, your ignorant amusement. The instructor left without glancing back. In his gaze, a fragile hope lingered, that this shame sank deep enough to reshape whoever eventually wore badges. Not the plastic card would judge people, but their attitude under pressure. And that attitude would be weighed first, sometimes by those they'd once dismissed. At admin offices, A new notice quietly appeared on the bulletin board. No bold headline, no red font, just calm, sober text. Beginning next week, all cadets must review the courtroom footage of Director Elijah Ford as core material for law enforcement ethics. No comments invited. Underneath, a simple note read, "No debate necessary. Remember." Hallways that once echoed with carefree jokes now felt like mausoleums for broken illusions. Only the slow, heavy footsteps of future officers remained, carrying a gravity no textbook had granted, hammered in by a video barely 10 minutes long. There was no hero here. Ford never sought that word. He wanted neither praise nor gratitude. His silence had never chased applause or headlines. The way he stayed quiet, letting a generation bear its true face, made cadets realize justice isn't forged by volume, but by restraint. Not those who shout most. Those brave enough to stay still at the right moment, allowing others to strip themselves down in public view. In one corner of the Academy's honor case, filled with photos of famed agents and legendary operations, someone quietly slid in a new, understated frame. No formal portrait, no biography, just a grainy black and white still of Ford lifting his badge in court, chin steady, eyes unreadable. Beneath it, small print read, "A man who stayed silent so an entire country could finally hear itself." No signature, no title, just truth. A week after that lesson at Quantico, the country woke to a slap delivered by ink alone. Headline letters heavier than any gavel strike. The filthiest trial of the year, and the victim was the FBI director. No subheading necessary. Conference rooms nationwide fell instantly, eerily, absolutely silent. It wasn't just a stinging title. It was a printed indictment, real paper, real circulation, impossible to dodge, impossible to dilute with spin. Major outlets ran the same headline untouched. Editors approved it in a single pass. No one dared soften the language or adjust a comma. These were papers once careful to balance narratives. Now they'd become double-edged blades, shielding no one, simply shoving the naked truth into the spotlight. The mayor of the city where that trial occurred called an emergency council within hours. The chamber was packed, yet no voices rose. Air conditioning roared on high, still unable to thin the choking dread. The mayor's face was ashen. Seeing him approach the podium said enough. His second-term hopes had evaporated before his office elevator even reached the ground floor. "I apologize to America," he rasped, voice gravelly, scraped thin. No applause followed, no nervous chuckle. That apology wasn't toward one man, but to a country watching the mask fall from its own government. That night, a federal figure unaffiliated with the ruling party appeared on a primetime show. The dark backdrop behind him felt like a tombstone. He stared straight into the camera, no script, no prompter, and delivered one line, "We just sat for a test and failed," then walked off. Like an unsigned verdict, that sentence rippled through screens, invisible waves smashing flimsy excuses. The system needed no saboteur. It had cracked from age. Like an old bridge with fractures hidden under dried paint, all it took was one downpour for every rusted joint to split open. This storm didn't come from scandal gossip. It came from one silent presence that forced a nation to actually look at itself. To ask, how long have we lived inside a costume we insisted was justice? Ford needed no further words. His silence now defined power. Not power to dominate, but power to force introspection. When politics couldn't salvage dignity and media couldn't salvage image, one refugee remained. Money. But even money turned away. Corporate sponsors backing the local department's projects, banks, conglomerates, investors, began quietly stepping back, pulling plugs without fanfare. No press conference, no PR notes, just frozen transfers, halted upgrades, canceled gear contracts. One bank demanded its logo removed from community policing brochures immediately. Nobody wanted branding near what commentators were now calling the true face of American law. Online, the hashtag #WeFailed started climbing within 2 short hours. Still, nobody tagged him. Nobody had his name. Everyone understood Ford wasn't performing for crowds. He didn't need trend charts or digital applause. In government offices, urgent emails titled "Damage Control" flew out. But how do you patch anything when the entire moral wall has collapsed inward? Legislative aides spammed crisis consultants, yet few wanted involvement. Nobody desired a contract where the problem was too obvious, too deep, beyond manageable spin. Law schools dropped weekly quizzes, replacing them with a single assignment: dissect the collapse in the trial of Director Ford and its ethical consequences. Students weren't hunting correct answers. They were forced toward confrontation. Nobody dared turn in lazy work, knowing the subject refused to be reduced. Inside one influential enforcement lobbying group, the budget slide vanished from the projector, replaced by a blank background and a single question from the chair. If we've already lost someone like him, what exactly do we think we still control? No answer emerged. None was truly possible anymore. By then, every official who'd laughed, denied, or belittled Ford now faced a mirror, one reflecting ethics, not appearance. The media hadn't slain anyone. Politics hadn't either. Yet when both and the money turned away, even the sturdiest structure dissolved like a sandcastle under relentless tide. No one could pull the curtain back up. The man who'd sat quietly in that courtroom hadn't ripped it down. He just let it shred. Newspapers dropped onto boardroom tables like stones into wells. Nobody flipped pages. The headline lashed hard enough: "Filthiest trial of the year. Victim, FBI director." D.C. no longer had room for ignorant silence. Yet in the soundproof basement of federal security headquarters, deliberate silence became policy. There, DOJ, DHS, and FBI representatives shared one table, each reading the same list. People quietly removed from systems, no hearings, no notices. Just a red-coded command. Some names were familiar, speakers of lofty fairness at past conferences. Now annotated coldly. Non-operational, removed from data stream. One high official who'd mocked Ford at the courthouse gate for not flashing his badge now stared at that page, seeing his own name boxed. No microphones recorded. Cameras were disabled by presidential-level security. The meeting bore a sterile title: Interagency Briefing, National Morality Experiment Review. Everybody understood the subtext. No one was here to learn. They were here to admit what had already unfolded. The shadow was moving, and none knew whose file was next. The windowless room, lit only by harsh white LEDs, bleached faces until they looked corpse pale, like everyone was living under skin not yet buried. A DHS legal advisor read aloud from Ford's internal memorandum: "A system is fair only when it reacts honestly to its own nakedness." He turned to Appendix C, an illegally leaked memo where someone had mocked Ford as cosplaying a secret agent. Metadata: leak traced to DHS. Every head turned his direction. No accusations voiced, but the look in their eyes already held a verdict, and the shape of his soon-to-be future. An FBI tech gasped as software blocked a login from a senior DOJ advisor's old account, the same man who'd once sneered on national TV. "He's not worth America's attention," that advisor had said. Now his access to all analytic platforms was locked. Cyber Behavioral Report tagged him flagged for shadow tracking. Another cache file surfaced, a training clip where Ford was edited into a video game villain, voice dubbed with lines he'd never uttered. Deputy FBI. That deputy now had every clearance labeled restricted pending verification. Nobody reopened the file. They didn't need to. Its existence already testified against them. On screen, a list appeared with no official heading, only a small line. Special review, authorized under executive order. Beneath it, Elijah Ford. No one spoke his name out loud. They didn't have to. Every person present registered the implications. This was bigger than any department. Next to that name, Tier 0 Oversight, Moral Test Division, no operational restrictions. Air seemed to thin. People had to remind themselves to breathe. No operational limits meant no stop orders, no review boards above him. Ford was running something outside any approved framework, and DOJ, DHS could only watch. A folder slid hand to hand with barely a whisper, containing names that showed negative moral impact during Ford's testing window. Some were crossed out, already gone. Others circled red, under active observation. One belonged to the person who denied Ford's attempt to speak in court, claiming eye contact isn't proper verbal testimony. He'd once joked, "If he talks with his eyes, I'll answer with a smirk." Behavioral scans showed his stress spiked highest whenever Ford's name appeared. Another internal clip surfaced from a legal symposium years earlier. Ford's image, pre-identity reveal, used in a talk titled "Spotting Power Delusions in Law Enforcement." His face slow-motioned, blurred, paired with goofy music. Audience roared. That clip became an internal meme captioned, "Never trust the silent ones." After everything came out, the presenter resigned. No farewell email, no speech. System log simply marked, "Inactive as of." No one dared ask details. A social analytics report noted over 400,000 mocking posts about Ford on internal law enforcement networks early in the experiment. Most common phrase, "thinks he's a ghost." That line went on coffee mugs, merch, keyboard stickers. Now AI cross-matched usage with personnel files, categorizing regional moral deviation scores in cold numbers. The joke had turned into a metric. In the conference room, no one mentioned this out loud, but memories flickered, especially about a former checkpoint incident. An officer had blocked Ford at a security turnstile because scanners couldn't read him, snarking, "People without a trace are the shadiest kind." He'd bragged later, turned it into a heroic anecdote. Now his entire login history was quarantined, his record flagged, under emergency observation, no immediate action. A seasoned DOJ official finally muttered, voice acidic, "So, does he plan to keep testing us?" The question was more trap than inquiry, hanging heavy. No one answered. An FBI rep twirled his pen, eyes like deep wells, and gave the faintest nod, neither yes nor no, just awareness. That silence held a message. If you still ask when it started, you've missed that you were in the experiment from the beginning. Slides kept advancing, like someone else was steering this meeting. Next image. A U.S. map. States shaded, light red, unlabeled. Everyone knew what it meant. Those marked regions housed concealed misconduct cases. Places Ford likely seeded censors, planted quiet people, waiting for one snicker to trigger the next reckoning. In a southern state notorious for old protest crackdowns, a tech once mocked Ford as the guy demanding justice with a stare in a viral recording. That joke had become local legend. Now, seeing his state glowing on the map, the same tech sat sweating through his shirt, throat desert dry. Beside him, a supervisor murmured, "Laugh once, regret forever." A DHS assistant whispered, "We have no protocol. Every simulation model broke." The colleague just stared. His complexion looked like someone given a terminal diagnosis with no treatment plan. The fear wasn't Ford's power. It was his refusal to show its edges. In a digital archive legally accessed under moral inspection, logs showed Ford requested full camera histories from county jails flagged for over-the-line interrogations. A senior manager had laughed in his face back then, saying, "This is the field, not an ethics seminar." That clip now headlined "Deviant Behavior Training." A DOJ analyst had once posted on intranet calling Ford the monk in a suit, pairing his photo with noir detectives for laughs. 1,700 reshared. His account now read, "Temporarily closed for verification." When colleagues joked, he shrugged, but biometric logins added a new screen. "You are currently under observation." In one corner, the DHS admin director flipped through a red-sealed folder containing notes from agents who'd served under Ford. A theme repeated, "Don't ask why." Observe, withdraw when necessary. He'd raised a generation that didn't argue, just documented. Now, as a nation quivered under a verdictless trial, he remained unseen. No press appearances, no passionate speeches. Yet every move in that room orbited his absence like planets tugged by a black hole's unseen gravity. Elijah Ford, the once silent defendant, had become the axis of an interagency review nobody dared title honestly. One DOJ leader recalled mocking him loudly last year. He'd clapped during a private screening, joked, "If that guy's really an agent, the Bureau should close shop." Later, he slashed ethics control funding. That statement turned into a headline quote in an internal analysis about silent resistance syndrome. Now, he couldn't look away from Ford's name on the screen. Not out of reverence, but fear, afraid that blinking meant missing the moment his file slid from reviewed to removed. Another report followed, with seminar footage. Ford had attended silently, never invited inside, standing in a hallway while younger officers staged pratfalls nearby, pretending he brought bad luck. One of those pranksters later suffered a total data pull. Emails, logs, messages gathered without explanation. Others immediately scrubbed chats and photos, terrified of digital ghosts. Their fear wasn't of Ford personally, but the realization that what they'd brushed off as harmless jokes were now living exhibits in a trial without defendant. Someone suggested crafting a media roadmap. Another scoffed, dripping acid. "Media isn't the threat, we are. Ford doesn't wield headlines, he wields our reflection." No rebuttal came. That wasn't commentary. It was a verdict on everyone in that room. A slide appeared with one line, "Not everyone is targeted. Only those convinced they never will be." No attribution. Yet many recognized it. A principle Ford had taped to his office door years earlier, half mocked. The man who'd laughed, calling it philosophy cosplay, later resigned silently. System log, inactive since. No one contacted him. No one wanted his story. An ex-HR director had once blocked Ford's promotion, citing poor leadership through interaction. Now that same trait orchestrated a wordless restructuring of their entire moral architecture. People exchanged glances, understanding each offhand comment now lived as evidence against its speaker. Ford didn't retaliate with actions. He let circumstances turn inward. Meeting ended with no scraping chairs, no handshakes, just sidelong looks, each wondering, am I next? Am I already on his radar? He needed no further moves. They'd built themselves a maze with no exit, where every opinion was a flare exposing them to his quiet oversight. In Central City's police headquarters, 3 senior officials no-showed Monday's briefing. No sick notes, no memos, just empty chairs where authority used to sit. Their desks stayed exactly as they'd left them, coffee still faintly warm. But their profiles vanished from the system. HR met a red warning, access revoked. These were the ones who jeered as Ford quietly observed from back rows, who joked, "Who dragged that guy out of a cave?" One had recently championed cleansing nameless black demonstrators under a security label. Ford was there that day, unnoticed by memory, but crystal clear in security archives. A clip caught officers demanding he raise his hands at barricades while he simply took notes. "I see those hands shaking, carrying something," they'd teased. That officer's name no longer appears anywhere in staffing charts. Another, front row during rumors of Ford's federal past, had barked, "Save the TV scripts for Netflix." He'd once ordered text to capture Ford slipping up on camera. When nothing surfaced, he asked for an edited version with fake screams for parties. That doctored footage is gone, and so is he. Nobody reaches him. Nobody knows where he's been reassigned, if anywhere. One cop once yelled into Ford's face, "No seat here for delusional nobodies." The bench mic caught it, though transcripts omitted the line completely. He'd privately shared that audio captioned, "Bet he thinks he's some deep cover agent." Now, no official discipline exists, yet his record simply reads, "Pending." A data specialist remembered Ford wandering into her planning office. Instead of helping, she snapped a back-view photo, texting, "Random guy can't read exit signs." Later, when she learned he was the director, she tried erasing it. The app cached it anyway. Now it appears in training slides on arrogance. She took several days off after spotting her own reflection in an ethics module he'd designed years ago, long before this trial. HR kept hitting locked screens. Access revoked. Tiered clearance required. A young officer tried 3 wrong passwords, then got a call, flat female voice. "Stop trying." He hung up, looking around. Everyone in the room avoided his eyes. Nobody questioned anything. They all understood something was silently sweeping through ranks. The Tuesday briefing room, once where they mocked Ford as Ghost Man, sat half empty. An unearthed photo showed staff overlaying filters on his silhouette for laughs. "Waiting on him to talk. Turned my brain to stone," the caption read. That employee, once nominated for training, now simply vanished from internal lists. A front desk worker who refused Ford a guest pass for improper enforcement attire later bragged online about him staring through the glass like a lost stray. Now her background laughter and exact words replay in an ethics module titled, "When Power Forgets It's Being Watched." She's been sent to remedial retraining. Parking lot scans turned up unclaimed cars. The system wouldn't release the owner info, only "User not found." Security whispered, they weren't fired. They were erased. On the main hallway's honor wall, a captain's photo disappeared overnight. He'd once shouted, "Clear the way for the head clown," when Ford entered. By morning, only a pale rectangle of unfaded paint remained. An assistant who'd witnessed it requested relocation to a quieter, ground floor position shortly after. In logistics, a badge key lay on a desk. System flagged it revoked by Central. All history connected to that card was scrubbed clean. Someone anonymously wrote in an internal channel once filled with jokes, "The Bureau doesn't punish, it deletes." Nobody answered. Nobody traced who typed it. An administrative deputy had once mocked, "If he's fit to investigate me, I'm fit to be Attorney General." Laughter thundered. Days later, his account froze. Emails gone, files encrypted, nameplate removed under cover of night. Technically, no one fired him. Practically, he'd been lifted right off the board. Some transferred, but no one knew where. Their names replaced with codes, no receiving department listed. Asking where became socially suicidal. In conference rooms, certain chairs stayed mysteriously empty. People avoided them as if they were charged, afraid that merely sitting there might draw attention. No formal purge decree appeared, yet everyone felt it, like the system, guided by unseen hands, knew exactly who should remain and who should vanish. Media never mentioned removals, no dramatic takedowns. But inside, whispers grew. Ford's not retaliating. He's scrubbing ink from a national map, quietly, line by line. Some dismissed officers tried calling old colleagues, only to meet number no longer in service. One texted, "Where are you?" The message showed red. Yoon answered. 6 hours later, his own phone lost system access. These disappearances shouted without sound, a career's death without ceremony, a punishment with no official judgment. Names gone, faces removed, emails wiped, like they never existed. In an emergency staffing meeting, 20-plus evaluation files tied to Ford's trial were simply missing. Attempts at data recovery returned one string. Silence is the audit. When Tech asked who possessed such deletion authority, the supervisor only laid his phone aside. He stared at the screen, saying nothing. Even personal devices now felt like listening ears. Elsewhere, a memorial wall for outstanding service came down. Photos weren't returned to anyone. They were boxed, unmarked, stored away. It was like the system was ashamed of the faces it once celebrated. On a closed senior forum, someone posted an old snapshot with Ford, captioned, "The guy who never smiles." Within hours, the post vanished. The poster's access was cut. Next day, his ID badge read, "Review pending." All system hooks severed instantly. A coworker muttered, "Old pictures hurt worse than fresh crimes." At the now vacant chief's desk, a thick list awaited. A column heading read, "Category, no longer exists in system." Stamp, executed under Security Directive, Internal Purge, EEF. Nobody asked about those two letters. Didn't need to. EF carried more weight than any decree. It was an eraser's quiet signature, undeniable. Seats stayed empty, names unspoken. Silence crawled like cold smoke through hallways that once thundered with certainty. Then came the leak that changed everything again. It revealed the trial wasn't random. It had been drafted, modeled, anticipated for 3 long years. The first clue popped up through a misclick. An auditor opened the wrong encrypted folder, finding a dry-titled file. Ethical Compliance Live Experiment, filed by E. Ford, timestamped 3 years earlier. Objectives read, "Monitor ethical drift in local enforcement under non-intervention." Final bold line, "Author identity must stay hidden until system fully confronts its own behavior." Shortly after, an internal log leaked. Ford had been denied printer access while prepping training documents, brushed off as external. The IT worker then emailed jokingly, "Some black folks really love pretending they're agents, No one flagged it then. Now that line lived inside every new recruit's ethics packet as hard proof. Crowd tracking software flagged a reporter who edited escort footage, added clownish audio, posted it on a humor platform. 1.4 million views, 80,000 nasty comments. He was dubbed Silent Gorilla. After Ford's status surfaced, the creators scrubbed their account. But duplicates lived on ghost stains the internet refused to erase. An internal email among court admins recommended seating Ford alone to avoid tainting the jury's look. Another replied, "Guys like trash. Any seat degrades the room." Both got suspended later. No reasons listed. Their discipline forms ended with ellipses, mirroring the only 3 dots Ford had ever left online. One guard kept Ford stuck in the lobby because he didn't dress federal enough, summoning backup just in case. Audio captured, he's statue silent, probably faking shock. That recording was reclassified, turned into the opening clip of a course titled, "When the Examiner Becomes the Exam." The guard never wore that uniform again. On social platforms, a meme challenge called Spot the Thug used Ford's image among uniforms. People guessed the criminal by posture alone, sharing millions of times. One viral caption, "Look at how he stands. You just know he's seen a judge." That screenshot later led a global investigative article on surface bias. Every sneer, every cruel share, every slur had been predicted in Ford's model. He hadn't arrived to defend, he'd come to test their cores. He designed conditions where self-appointed examiners exposed themselves, convinced no one important was looking. He was never the misjudged man. He was architect, script, stage. That courtroom wasn't where he was humiliated. It was where the entire system walked into his trap, believing he was the one on trial. Unbeknownst to them, 8 hidden cameras were installed in blind spots weeks prior, gathering video, audio, and biometric cues with surgical precision. Day before proceedings, Ford sat alone on an exterior stone bench. A worker mistook him for homeless, tossed a flyer, said, "Free meals are that way." When he later saw Ford exit court with director on his badge, he nearly dropped. He never reported for duty again afterward. In the western hallway, law students on a field trip filmed him. One commented, "Totally has that cold serial killer vibe. Hashtag cold-blooded creep. None of them ever completed law school." A clerk tasked with handing documents to counsel scoffed, "No lawyer, no family. Must be the kind nobody touches." Ceiling mics captured the contempt in his eyes. Weeks later, he transferred to storage logistics and stopped meeting anyone's gaze longer than 2 seconds. A leaked note from Ford's training archives read, "We don't need to resist, just witness. Evil feels safe when nobody pushes back." He never pushed. That restraint turned out to be the heaviest blow. One report summarized, "The less he reacts, the more primitive the system behaves." Within Tier 0 files, Project Mirror diagrammed predicted abuses from jokes to edited footage. Reality matched perfectly. The system thought it was free. He'd just removed supervision. And somewhere down a bright hallway, a new recruit read a simple training line. "Justice doesn't need proclamation." The rest, he now understood, is what you reveal. When laughter shows who we really are. For those of us who remember watching grainy newsreels of marches, water hoses, and angry crowds in the 1950s and 60s, it is painful to see how familiar the sound of cruel laughter still is. In Elijah Ford's courtroom, the jokes came easy, mocking his clothes, his silence, even his face. People filmed him, added silly music, and passed him around the internet like a cheap cartoon. To them, he was just another nameless black man in trouble. But many of you know, from long lives and hard memories, that the way people laugh at the vulnerable tells you more about the crowd than the person on the stand. Ford did not beg, did not shout, did not try to win their approval. By saying almost nothing, he allowed every insult, every giggle, every edited video to pile up in plain view. Older Americans understand this truth. Sometimes the ugliest part of injustice is not the blow, but the grin that follows. And sometimes the loudest confession. A system makes is the way it finds a suffering human being funny. Power without character will eventually collapse. If you have lived long enough to see presidents rise and fall, companies boom and vanish, you know that power without character never lasts. That courtroom was full of titles: judge, chief, officer, clerk, even law students hungry for careers. On paper, they were the respectable ones. Yet when Ford's quiet history began to surface, when classified files flashed red and high-ranking officials suddenly appeared in dark suits, the room changed. The very people who laughed the hardest began looking at the floor. Some of them later lost access, lost positions, even seemed to vanish from the systems they trusted. It was not revenge in the movie sense. It was something colder and more real. Their own words, their casual cruelty, had become evidence against them. For those of us who have buried friends, worked long years, and watched reputations rise and crumble, this rings familiar. Power can bully for a while, but sooner or later, character sends the bill. And when that bill comes due, no badge, no office, no fancy title can pay it. The older we get, the clearer we see that the only protection that truly holds is a clean conscience and a record of treating others as human beings, not as props in our stories. Silence can be a test, not a weakness. Many of us were raised to speak up for yourself, and there is wisdom in that. But Ford's story reminds older hearts of something deeper. Sometimes silence is not weakness. It is a deliberate test. He sat there, blood on his collar, eyes steady, letting the system show its true face. He did not explain himself to people who had already decided what he was. Instead, he let them talk, joke, and expose what lived inside their own hearts. Later, at Quantico and in agencies around the country, young recruits watched the footage in silence. They saw not a thug, but their own future uniforms reflected back at them. They realized that the real exam was never about Ford at all. It was about them. Those of us in our late 60s, 70s, and beyond understand that age itself teaches a similar lesson. You learn that not every attack deserves an answer, and not every lie must be chased. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is stand still and let truth quietly assemble its case. That kind of strength may not make headlines, but it shapes grandchildren who are watching, neighbors who are learning, and communities that slowly grow, ashamed of the way they once laughed. What we leave behind. For older Americans, Ford's story is not just a dramatic headline, it is a question about legacy. We have watched this country struggle, heal, backslide, and reach again for its better angels. Many of you marched, voted, volunteered, raised children and grandchildren to do the right thing, even when no one is watching. Now we see a man who turned that idea inside out. He acted as if everyone was always being watched, not by cameras alone, but by their own conscience. His silence forced a nation to hear itself. The lesson for our generation is simple and stern. The real measure of justice is not how loudly we praise it, but how we behave when we think the person in front of us is powerless. Even in our later years, we still have work to do, telling these stories at the dinner table, challenging casual cruelty, voting with our values, and refusing to share the kind of mocking videos that once humiliated Ford. One day, long after we are gone, young officers, judges, and citizens will study this case. What they learn may depend on whether we are willing, even now, to admit where we laughed when we should have listened, and choose in whatever years we have left to live as if our own character is still on trial. After hearing Elijah Ford's story, the silent director who let a courtroom and a whole system expose itself, how do you feel about the way power treats people who seem powerless? Have you ever witnessed someone being mocked, judged, or dismissed only to find out later who they really were? If you had been in that courtroom, would you have laughed along, spoken up, or quietly walked away? Share your honest thoughts in the comments, give this video a like if it made you think, and subscribe to my channel so we can keep learning from stories like this together.